Hi guys, welcome back to At Home with Holly. My name's Holly. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. So I am finishing up. I am halfway. Got sunglasses on and I'm in the house. It's one of those days. So I am finishing up a large canning day, and I want to show you all the things and take you back with me. And I'm getting ready to go outside and put some plants in the ground and move some things around and do that kind of stuff. So I want to take you guys with me outside, but first I want to take you guys back to show you all the projects that we got done. I am trying to clean out my freezer with all the tomatoes that I harvested already, the tomatillos, all the stuff. I'm just trying to make room in my freezer because I have a quarter of beef coming and potentially a half a hog, and I do not have enough room. So I'm cleaning out and using what I need, and we're eating from our freezer and making room for all the tomatoes that are going in and all that kind of stuff. So let me take you back. Let me show you what we made so far. And while I'm getting ready to go outside to do the outdoor projects, you guys can watch that while I'm getting shoes on and all that kind of stuff. And I'll meet you back here. So the first thing I did was I took all the tomatoes and tomatillos out of my freezer, and I pulled out a roast while I was in there just to make my life a little easier. I let them thaw overnight, and the first thing I did was make the salsa verde. So I've made this with you guys before, but I like to roast my tomatillos and the onions and the garlic and the peppers before I combine them to make a salsa. So I went ahead and I peeled and quartered some of these beautiful red onions that we grew together. Got them all on the tray, had some garlic that we grew together that was frozen in the bag in the freezer. I took the stems off the peppers, I cut them in half, I scooped the seeds out and put them all on the tray. I roasted them until they looked like, flat tires with a little bit of char on them. I put them all together in the pot, and then I went ahead and used the food processor to do this. I love salsa verde. I use, not the food processor, sorry, the immersion blender. I love salsa verde. I use it as enchiladas. I use it with chips. I use it anytime I can, right? I am also a fan of cilantro, so I added a ton of cilantro to this recipe. If you don't like cilantro, that makes me so very sad. I know for some people it tastes like soap. For me, I don't have that gene, so I do love the brightness that the cilantro adds. So I chopped up the cilantro to have it ready for after I was able to get all these veggies roasted. So I added the lime juice, the salt, the pepper, the cilantro, blended it all up with an immersion blender, got it in the jars, and put it through the canner. And then with my tomatoes that I had thawed, I decided to make two things. I decided to make pizza sauce for dipping. My daughter loves to dip all her pizza in it, all the crust and everything, and also tomato soup. So for the tomato sauce, the pizza sauce that you just saw, I just ran the tomatoes through the food mill, added the seasonings, let it cook down a little bit, and then added it to the jars. Then I took the other half of the tomatoes and I roasted them as well, grabbed a little can of roasted garlic from the deep freezer, went ahead and chopped up some onions with my little chopping machine to add to the soup. I used the roasted garlic. I sauteed the onions, added some basil to it. Now, the funny thing about this basil is I went out to pick the fresh basil, and I also picked up some ground cherries while we were out there to see what I do with those. But when it said to do 2 cups of tightly packed basil, man, when you try to make it, I've never really measured it before. I just usually grab 2 big handfuls. Today, I actually tried to stuff the tightly packed jar to 2 cups, and it took so much basil. So I'm so excited because this tomato basil soup is probably the most basil-y one I've ever made, and I'm here for it. I love fresh basil. So I got all the basil measured out, had it washed and dried and waiting. And in the bottom of the pan, I had the sauteed onions and the garlic and the pepper and salt. And I went ahead and added the basil to it. Actually, I added the wine first. Oh, this is the ground cherries. So I'm actually separating the ground cherries, and I'm going to throw these in the freezer for an upcoming project later on. But in the bottom of the pan, I had the onions and garlic sauteing. I added the wine, added the salt and pepper. I added the basil, and then I went ahead and used the food processor and got it all smoothed out. I just like a smooth, creamy tomato soup. And then I went ahead and added the tomatoes that Olivia and I ran through the food mill. We added the tomato puree, got it in jars, and got it all canned up. So that was our tomato basil soup. I've made that with you guys before, but I'll link the recipe. This was a new recipe for me. This is the sweet cherry barbecue sauce. And so I had some of these cherries that needed used up, and I added the brown sugar, the garlic, the salt, some more onions. I added apple cider vinegar and the seasonings. You add it to the pot, get it going at a nice boil. It reduces by half. I used my immersion blender, and then it was getting very late. So I actually let this come to room temperature, put it in the fridge, and let it stay in there overnight. And then the next morning, I came out and I got my jars out of the dishwasher, got them ready, pulled the barbecue sauce, which is delicious, by the way. And I got it in the jars, got it processed in the canner, and we are good to go. So I also have the apple barbecue sauce that we made together last year, and I just like the sweet and savory, like sweet and spicy barbecue sauces. I'm more a fan of that than just smoky or just one note. So I really enjoyed this cherry barbecue sauce. I'll link the recipe. It's definitely one that I will be making again in the future. So once we've got all this canned up, I once I got them ready to go, I had them in the canner, and I love my digital pressure canner because you can use a pressure canner or a water bath canner, and you can literally just set it and forget it unless it beeps at you and then you push a button. So we got all this ready to go. We got it cooling, we got it labeled, we got the jars clean, and I'm super happy with the finished product that we got with the barbecue sauce, the pizza sauce, the tomato basil soup, and the salsa verde. So we cleared out a ton of room in the freezer for the meat coming in, and let's get ready to go outside. Ooh, it is sticky. Okay. First things first, we have to give the chickens treats. Put some of our stuff down because some of them are going through a very hard molt. Let me show you. Are you looking a little rough? You guys looking a little rough? Some extra treats. And some extra treats. Give them some extra black soldier fly larvae. They love it. Aren't these splash Americanas so gorgeous? I'm obsessed with their little bearded faces. They're so cute. And they're so friendly. They're doing good. They're all one big flock now. The little ones get pushed around, but nobody's hurting anybody, so I call that a win. Okay, enough chicken talk. We've got 4 holes to dig. So I want to we're in a drought. Most of the Midwest is, especially in Ohio. We're in a drought. And so I want to put more of these rings that I put around all the other trees. I want to put them around the 3 grape plants, and before their stems harden, vines, I don't know, before they harden up. After this winter, they'll become hard, and those will be the ones that the new ones grow off of every year. So I want to get those 3 with some rings around them. And then I also want to put the second fig tree we have in the ground with a ring around them. So that's our project today. And maybe pull all of the weeds out from around the currants because they're getting smothered. This is our little fig tree. There's a ton of figs, so I'm probably messing up and planting at the wrong time, but this is the time that I have. So we're going to put that fig tree, which is the same one as this one, in the same row and plant it right here. Where I live, they're pretty much going to die back to the ground almost every winter. So they're never going to get like 7-8 feet tall. They may get 4 or 5 on a great year if they survive the winter. So it's okay to plant them a little closer than you would if you were living somewhere with better weather. And then we've got the grapes. So you just kind of let them go crazy the first year and grow as much as they want to. And then you pick the way I'm going to do it is pick the 2 longest, strongest vines. What are they? What do we call them? And they're going to touch both wires. Anyway, I'll take you through that when we get there. But first things, let's get the fig hole dug, and then we'll work on the grapes. My goodness. Oh, he rooted. Wow. Okay. Friends, let me show you what this guy did. He sent his root all the way down through the landscape fabric. That's incredible. So I definitely should have planted him a while ago, but this will be better in the long run. All right, so he is in there, and I gave him a good drowning. And all this grass is gonna sink down, so I put it around. The ones that I did that with, they ended up looking good. The ones that I didn't do that as well with, it ends up looking like they're sitting really high because it settles. So I need to remember to do that every time I plant one to kind of mound the grass up, and it'll settle down. Okay, got that just going on our apple trees, and gonna try to figure out what we got going on here. For our 3 grape plants, what I'm looking to do is I planted them, I let them grow whichever direction and however many vines they wanted to all season. And now I'm taking a look at them. I am going to go through them, select the 2 strongest looking vines, and I'm actually going to put the watering ring around them before those vines harden up, because over the winter those vines will harden up and become like a trunk essentially. And so the reason I'm looking for the 2 strongest ones is because I want to secure them to the bottom wire as a support. And then the top wire, which is about 5 feet tall, I'm going to secure them to those as well. So this whole season, the goal was to let it grow really vigorously, establish roots, and grow 2 main vines on every plant that are going to go straight up and touch both the bottom wire and the top wire, and those are going to be the supports. And then next year we're going to be able to focus on which direction we want the plants to grow and where we want the grapes to grow from and all that kind of stuff. So the goal this year was just to establish the roots, establish the plants, and get 2 strong vines so that they would be long enough to reach both wires. So as I'm going through, this is where we planted the first fig. I went ahead and cleaned up all the weeds in that bed. And then I went to this bed and cleaned up all the weeds. That's our pile from trimming up the grapes. This is the first grape. And then I took the weeds out of this bed. And now we're working on this second of 3 grape plants. I'm trying to weed the beds as I go. And then I'm also leaving the hose in on real slow in each of these apple trees that are looking real stressed so that they can have a nice long deep drink. So here is our second grape. It is right next to the raspberries, which the wasps are a big fan of right now. So need to keep an eye out on that. But here we go. I'm going to get the weeds out from the bottom and a hole dug and get this ring in there. So I didn't know about these watering rings until earlier this year. They definitely would have been easier to put in before the raised beds, before the landscape fabric and all that stuff. But I'm just super grateful that I'm able to get them around the grapes before these vines harden up into trunks, and I wouldn't be able to get them around without breaking a trunk. So super glad for that. Sorry, Mr. Grape. We got to make some decisions. All right, we're going to give that guy, this sad pear tree, we're going to give him a very big drink while we do our last of our grapes. We're moving right along. I am going to keep weeding as I go. Now this one isn't nearly as big. It is definitely going to benefit from getting trained up so it can get more sunlight. This was actually the hardest of the 3 grape plants to do. My ground is always clay and hard to get through, but this drought that we're in means it is dry, solid clay. And so that's been an interesting thing to dig through, but that's all right. But the landscape fabric, the hard clay, and this being the smallest of the grape plants, because it's at the most north side of this garden, I guess. So it does get full sun, but it gets I think it gets a little bit more like shaded sun, or filtered sun is the proper way to say it. So it was a smaller plant, so I had to be even more careful with it because I didn't want to accidentally break the vine that was going to be the strongest one. And then also this bed, the last bed in this row, was an afterthought, and to fit it in, this space actually had to be smaller. So this was a smaller opening, definitely more chances for me to damage the grape, and a little tighter squeeze. But we got it in there. We got it, the ring around it. We got the grape plant trimmed up, and we are good to go on all three plants. So here is the last bed. We've gone all the way through and weeded and done what we needed to do. Here's the last bed. There's about 12 alpine strawberry plants in there and 700 weeds and 2 currant plants. And if we don't get the weeds out of there, the currant plants are never going to survive. So I'm going to go ahead and take a minute and get this all weeded. All right, that is much better. Get those plants some fertilizer, see if they make it. Otherwise, we can replace the one that's not looking good. And everybody is planted. And the trees have all had a very nice long drink. All right, y'all, I am super sweaty. It is now officially the heat of the day. I am going to get these weeds put into the compost, and then I am going to go inside and do a little bit of work and enjoy the air conditioning. So I want to thank you guys so much for all the likes and the comments and the shares, and for following along this journey with me. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We have a lot more growing and projects and building to do. So thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye, friend.